Guys, welcome back to Upside Down Data. In this video, I want to talk about the UDPI risk indicator for Atom, which is the native token of the Cosmos blockchain. If you guys find this valuable, subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter where we put out regular updates about the UDPI for multiple assets and more. I'm going to get my video out of the way to make sure that we can see everything clearly here. So the upside downside potential indicator, or the UDPI, is our in-house risk indicator here on the channel. And what you're looking at here is the Atom price history color-coded by UDPI. So if you look over on the right, you see the UDPI scale going from 5 up on top, and that's color-coded red, down to -5 on the bottom, and that's color-coded green. And as you might guess, based on that color coding, when the UDPI reads 5, that indicates that the asset is very high risk, that there's relatively limited upside potential that's realistic for the near future, but that there's plenty of downside potential. But on the other hand, when it's reading -5 and showing green, it's the opposite. It means that an asset is extremely low risk and that there's plenty of upside potential that's realistic for the near term and limited downside potential that's realistic. Each one of these dots that represents a day in Atom's price history. So what we're looking at here is each day how the risk was looking depending, in relation to the price action. And historically, the UDPI, the UDPI has been really good at identifying low risk and high risk points of time for accumulating or selling Atom. So the COVID crash back in March 2020 was extremely low risk, and that preceded a run up from $1 all the way up to $8 later in the year. And the risk was more elevated at that point. The risk then came down and consolidated for a while in that next period of time. And it also flashed green again, and that preceded another run up from $4 to $30. And then we consolidated again. Risk came down, then it came back up a little bit more before dumping way down, as we all remember, in May until July. Risk was really, really low. Look at all that green. That was a great buying opportunity as identified by the UDPI. And sure enough, that preceded a big run up from $8 to $46. It's interesting actually that Atom has been extremely, methodical in its run since the beginning of the COVID kind of era. It's put in 3 7 to 8 X's followed by retracements or periods of consolidation. Very kind of systematic and regular in its movements up, which is interesting to see. Now, one reason I wanted to talk about Atom is because the last time we did a video on Atom was right when we launched the UDPI risk indicator for it, which just happened to be at a local top. That was October 26th. The price was around 40, although I wouldn't say it was sitting at 40 because by chance we launched the indicator on the very day that Atom put in a very impulsive move up into the 40s again before getting rejected, harshly coming back down within 24 hours. And, has been consolidating ever since. The price has been in a downtrend and the risk has been coming down as well. So by coincidence, we talked about it right before some serious volatility happened and there's been some changes. And so we wanted to update you on what those changes look like. And you can see it on the chart that, we talked about it on the 26th when risk was sitting at 1.37. It was orange. We had even seen that there was a little bit of gapping. You can see that, that day was distant enough from the previous day in terms of volatility that you can see space between them on the chart. Since then, that higher level of risk has come down. You can see this on the price chart too. This might help to make it intuitive. That we've been, more or less going sideways in the grand scheme of things since that big run up that went through September. And we're now sitting at $32 after a peak at about 46, have retraced about 30%. And this is where we are right now, is about -0.4. So recall that on October 26th, when we first launched the UDPI for Atom, the price was about 40 and the UDPI was about 1.37. Now it's about -0.4. So it's come down quite a lot. And that means that there's more upside potential forming and less downside potential because some of the realistic downside potential has already happened in that move down from 46 to 32. Now, we talk about this a lot on the channel, that to use these really effectively, these UDPI risk indicators, you want not just to have access to one, because it doesn't tell you everything you need to know just by looking at this minus 0.40 on Atom, but you want to look at it in the context of other assets as well, and the whole market really. And so we can do that here. Here are the other 15 UDPI risk gauges that we have, the other 15 assets that we're monitoring. And I want to point out two things here when we look at Atom alongside these other 15. First thing I want to point out is that overall, the market does not look particularly overheated. Bitcoin, obviously the market leader, is at plus 1.35, which is in the positive territory, which means that there's more downside potential than upside potential, technically, but not very overheated. And that's true of most other assets as well. So there's no necessity of a pullback. If you look at this chart and try to get a sense of where the market is at as a whole, there's nothing here to really worry you. And that also lines up with a lot of other sources of information that I'm not going to get into too deeply in this video, but are worth mentioning. The on-chain data for Bitcoin looks good. It indicates that this bull market is not played out. It's not over, and there's more to come. We don't know when, but likely there's more to go in this bull market. Other sources of price action data about how long cycles might take, from one peak to the next peak in Bitcoin's history, also indicate that we're probably not done. And so that's also reflected on these charts. There's nothing here that says high risk. There's nothing here that says super low risk either, but there's nothing that you see on this chart that should really worry you. So that's point number one. We could continue to trend up. In fact, we likely will. And so interpret these risk gauges with that in mind. Point number two is that given that there's nothing on the whole to worry about in terms of the market being overheated or anything like that, we can see that Atom is especially appealing. Most of these assets are, above minus 0.4. Only two of them are actually below Atom's risk level, and that's ADA and XRP up there on the top left. Other than that, Atom is as low risk as it gets. And so we're not only trying to identify points in time when the market is appealing to be in, to get exposure to crypto. We also want to identify which assets at any given point in time are especially attractive in their risk to reward ratio, have especially good upside potential and limited downside potential, relative to others. So that's the case with Atom here. Given that, what we want to do is keep an eye on Atom, but also to look at the Atom chart, the UDPI chart, and see if we can identify a reversal coming. And so this is a situation where it's really useful to look at the UDPI in this other way. So we were looking at this color coding of the price chart before. This is just looking at the UDPI output on its own. So here on the left-hand side, we see the UDPI going from 5 all the way on top, meaning high risk, to -5 on the bottom, meaning low risk. And then we have this oscillating white line here, which over time, this is the UDPI reading for Atom. And all the way on the right, today we're at -0.4 as we just saw. But what we're looking for here is the first signs of a reversal back to the upside, because if we go back through Atom's history, we can see that when there was a bottom on the UDPI and we entered a big uptrend, like the COVID crash, that first major dip here on the left side of the screen, or the summer of 2021, which is when we were all the way down to -5 here in the recent past, we want to try to identify those bounces when we see the trend reversing. And if we look back to the present day, we see that, there's a hint on the chart that could be happening. It's too early to say, though. So, we've had these little upticks during this downtrend after the UDPI peaked at 5 in September. We've been correcting, right? That's what I talked about earlier in the video. And along the way, there were these little upticks where it looked like things might be reversing, but were not ultimately, and continued downwards. What's different now, potentially, is that this is the first time we're seeing that kind of motion when we're below the midpoint. When we're below 0, we're in negative territory where there's more upside potential than downside potential. Still too early to say, though. We're going to have to see if this plays out. If it continues to the upside, then that would seem really promising, because then we would have a situation where, we're still low risk on this asset, but have started to make moves to the upside. Too early to say for that. But this is why we want to watch Atom. And this is why we want to use all these risk indicators alongside each other, because we can identify Atom alongside ADA and XRP as being in pretty appealing territory. And that can cue us in to the fact that we're going to want to watch this chart and see what happens. So, watch along with us, guys. We'll keep you updated about Atom and about all 15 of the others, as well as new ones that will be coming on pretty soon. So if you guys have assets that you're interested in seeing that you'd like us to talk about, leave us a comment down below, and we'll do our best to get to those when we can. Remember, with the UDPI, we're all going to make it.